Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Marwan bin Hidayat from Group 6 and my metric number is 052888. As the first presenter, I will explain more further for the first two subtopics which are 3.1 and 3.2. Let us look at subtopic 3.1, Ethics, a branch of philosophy. Ethics is a major branch of philosophy. So as a major branch of philosophy, it concerns with right or wrong, good or bad, appropriate or inappropriate, moral or immoral, ethical or unethical actions. Therefore, we can just define an ethic in terms of branches of philosophy as a code of moral standards of conduct for what is good and right, as opposed to what is bad or wrong. Also, ethics consists of question about duty, obligation, responsibility, individual and society rights. Next slide. Okay, actually, ethics can be divided into two branches, which are meta-ethics and prescriptive, or also known as normative ethics. We go one by one. First, what is meta-ethics? Meta-ethics is the study of where ethics concept came from and what they actually mean. In meta-ethics, it tries to ask questions like what is the meaning of the word good or bad and how can we justify actions to be good or bad. Moreover, in this meta-ethics, it classifies morality into two main forms. Number one, we got moral relativism, and number two is moral objectivism. Okay, how can we differentiate between these two types of moral? Okay, in moral relativism, there are no absolute or objective moral values or principles. It claims that what is right or good differs from culture to culture or even from person to person. For example, although most people and culture consider lying to be wrong, according to moral relativism, lying is only wrong if the individual doing the lying feels that it is wrong. While in moral objectivism, it believes that they are objective moral principles that valid for all people and all social environment. So an objective basis his or her moral system on a common human nature, common needs and desires. For example, it is wrong to kill innocent people just because you don't like them. Alright, we finished with meta-ethics. Now we look at normative ethics. Normative ethics takes on a more practical task, which is to arrive at a moral standard that regulates right and wrong conduct. Normative ethics is concerned with how people ought to act, what sort of person one ought to be, and what sorts of policy ought to be implemented. This may involve articulating the good habit that we should acquire, the duties that we should follow, or the consequences of our behavior on other. Again, in normative ethics, it is also has two types of ethical theories. Number one is teleological theories, and second one is deontological theories. As we could see, teleological theory is a type of ethics formulated in terms of consequences or outcome, where an action is right or wrong because of what result. To make it simple, in teleological theory, the rightness of action is determined solely by the amount of good consequences they produce. The next one is deontological theory. So in this theory, it formulated that an action is right or wrong if it follows the path of duty regardless of the consequences, which means that goodness or badness is determined by the action only. Okay, now we are in a new subtopic, which is subtopic 3.2, utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is one of the most influential teleological ethical theories, and it is applied widely by economists in order to make rational decisions. There are two forms of utilitarianism. The first one is act utilitarianism, and the second one is rule of utilitarianism. So what does it means by utilitarianism? It means that an action and policy should be evaluated on the basis of the benefits and costs they will impose on society. In any situation, the right action or policy is the one that will produce the greatest net benefits and less cost. In the simple way to describe about utilitarianism, it proposed that an action is right if it produces the most utilities or benefits for all persons affected by the action, including the person who performing the act. For example, it is right to let one patient die in order to harvest his organs, and perhaps we could save 5 lives. So that's all from me. Thank you.
So we continue. Form of utilitarianism. So, a technological ethical theory actually found by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So, therefore, they have two forms, which is rules and acts. So, we can first we move on to Act of Utilitarianism by Jeremy Bentham. It says that an action is right if and only it produces a greatest balance of pleasure or pain for everyone, which means that people should act in a way that was the most beneficial for their community, country, and law should have benefit for most of the society. Next, we move on to Rule of Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. So he said that an action is right if and only it conforms to a set of the rules and general acceptance of which will produce a greatest balance of pleasure over pain, the greatest number. Or simple of sentence, which we can say an act right if it required by rules that is itself member of set of rules.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Shemadi bin Faisal and my metric number is 054322. So I'm gonna explain the subtopic which is 3.4, the critics on utilitarianism. This subtopic have 2 points, which is the strength of utilitarianism and the weaknesses of utilitarianism. So I will go first to the strength of utilitarianism. The definition of the strength of utilitarianism is another strength of utilitarianism is its emphasis on neutrality. When making a decision, one is to take a God-eye view of things and consider everyone equally. This emphasis on neutrality makes utilitarianism an impartial of moral theory, meaning it consider everyone's status and interest as equal. And this subtopic, according to the moral reasoning, an action would provide some benefit or cause some harm is generally a morally relevant reason for or against performing it. Result-oriented, which is provides a relatively precise and objective method for moral decision makings, since we are trying to evaluate or assess the goods and bad consequence before acting. Simple to apply and to be understood, goodness of consequence can be easily measured and compare a teleological decision maker's needs only to determine the possible causes or action and calculate the consequence of each one. Firmer ground to rule of morality and role obligation, and eliminates the difficult task of calculating the consequence of each individual act. Alright, let's go to the second point, which is the weaknesses of utilitarianism. The meaning of this point is utilitarianism seeks to predict the consequence of an action which is impossible. The weaknesses of utilitarianism have 5 points, which does not give an account of the rights and what just and fair which an ethical theory is expected to give. The individual happiness and satisfaction cannot rationally be the main objective sense of purpose in life. Some people might prefer to sacrifice their own happiness in order to do good deeds. Degrading to humans, which is the means is it degrade human beings to the level of animals, because the theory suggests that people's only goals in is attaining a pleasure. They encourage selfishness, which is the mean it is only concern is that one should be concerned only with maximizing one's own happiness. Lastly, time-consuming, which is it is impossible to calculate the amount of pleasure and pain implied by each alternative course of action, and then come to a conclusion based on their utilitarian calculus.
Okay, so we continue to deontology, Kant's ethic of duty theory. So before we move on to a slide, I want intro about Immanuel Kant. Kant was born on April 22, 1724 in Kaliningrad, Russia, and he spent 50 years as a metaphysics lecturer. So deontology is an ethical theory that uses rules to distinguish right from wrong. Deontology is often associated with philosopher in Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that ethical action follow universal moral law, such don't lie. This approach tends to fit well with our natural institution about what isn't ethical. So next, according to the Kant, it's not a matter the individual weighing up consequence. Human action must be rational based on human intelligence and willpower. So an action is morally right only if actor is motivated by a good will. Kant's theory as strength and weakness is just two important funding. So first, the introduced principle of universality, ability, and emphasis of respect of person. Next, it provides a strong foundation of our rights, individual human rights, be acknowledged and inviolable. And Kant's ethics certainly complement Islamic ethical value, such as especially those related to ihsan, benevolence and being kind, and respect and adil is justice. So for example, deontology state that an act that is not good morally can lead to something good, such as a shooting in intruder. Killing is wrong. To protect the family, protecting them is a right. And our example, that means protecting your family is rational things to do, if not the morally best thing to do. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Muhammad Hakim Shakir bin Muhammad Sani. My metric number is 052872. Okay, today I want to present about Aristotle virtue ethic theory. Focus of this theory is virtue in human. Virtue is a good moral value or character trait that manifests itself in habitual action. Virtue ethic theory recognizes the need for one to emulate virtue such as honesty, courage, self-control, and respect for human and non-human to live a rewarding. For Aristotle, honesty in the honest person is going to be the person that tells truth when the truth is warranted, when the truth is appropriate, and of course, the virtue has to corresponding with basic consumption that morality is both necessary and vital for human being. People who compromise morality are degrading themselves, and they have missed their goal in life. Virtuous act require consequence, choice, and moral purpose or motivation. Man has personal moral responsibility for his action. Moral virtue cannot be achieved abstractly. It requires moral action in a social environment. Aristotle believed ethics enable mankind to lead successful and rewarding life. According to Aristotle, in order to achieve rewarding life, firstly, live in a just society. Second, individuals must engage themselves with a good friend to support them. Third, individuals need material and physical provision. Fourth, individuals need to develop and cultivate their potential. According to Aristotle, the purpose and ultimate goal in life is to achieve eudaimonia. That's meaning is happiness. He believed that eudaimonia was not simple virtue nor pleasure, but rather it was the exercise of virtue. Okay, for the slides I want to present about code of ethics. I can be classified into two types code of ethics. Firstly, compliance based, and second is integrity based. A compliance based code of ethics is stressed on the prevention of unlawful behavior by increasing control through the formulation of rule and regulation and imposing penalty and punishment on wrongdoers. Three key elements include the prevention, detection and punishment of non-compliant behavior. For example, Saiful compliance-based code may prohibit its employee from making material misrepresentation of fact when acting within the scope of their employment. This type of code of ethics is based on a clear-cut rule and will define consequence rather than individual monitoring of personal behavior. Despite strict adherence to the law, some compliance-based code of conduct do not thus promote a climate of moral responsibility within the company. A integrity-based code of ethics is the organization guiding value, create an environment that supports ethical behavior and focuses on shared responsibility among employees. An integrity-based code of ethics still contain rules prohibiting illegal behavior but focus on proper action or effect that should be achieved rather than behavior to be avoided. With an integrity-based code of ethics, it is up to each employee to interpret how they should carry himself and behave as representative of the organization. Given the many different personality and perspective on what constitutes ethical behavior, this can be a positive step, enabling each individual consider her own value and how they will act in a way that is ethical for them. Related to code of ethics, corporate culture. Business organization has their shared pattern of corporate culture. Firstly, 1. Belief. 2. Expectation. 3. Meaning that influence. 4. Guiding thinking. 5. Value of its member. Corporate culture begin with the top management. Good governance and leadership by example shown by manager. Leadership is the role to demonstrate ethical behavior. Thank you.